it was around the era 2006, 2007. Believe it or not, and it may sound like false news, that was an era where we had relative bipartisanship on the need for climate change action. That was an era when, in the lead up to the 2007 election, then Prime Minister John Howard swung his support behind an emissions trading scheme. It was an era where, believe it or not, Rupert Murdoch himself said that we should give the planet the benefit of the doubt, that we should support scientists who said that the planet needed action on climate change. So that was 2007, and that is where I began my conversation with former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull and asked what happened next. Can we take that, take the interview away there?
Well, you could, I guess Tony Abbott was part of it, but I think he was a sort of a manifestation of a rise in a sort of a fight back by the fossil fuel lobby, supported by right-wing populism, or nut jobbery, depending on how you want to describe it, which essentially turned issues of physics into questions of belief or identity, so that we've now got to the loopy stage where people are still saying they believe or disbelieve in climate change or global warming, which is about as intelligent as saying you believe or disbelieve in gravity. But then the big factor here, one of the biggest factors, of course, was the Murdoch press. Murdoch's media has become more and more partisan over the years, over the 40 plus years I've known Rupert, and it has become essentially now propaganda, and very dangerous propaganda, as the Americans learnt on the 6th of January.
Absolutely. I'd like to delve in there because I guess it can be a chicken and egg argument, but obviously a media that's prepared to throw so much doubt on climate change is going to prop up or help politicians who do the same. Which do you think came first? And can you identify a time when the scales began to tip in favour of politics and values-driven, as you call, nut jobbery over science? Was there a particular time when you thought, hang on, this is different?
Well, look, Howard never took climate change seriously in the sense that he was always a skeptic, right? So, John supported an emissions trading scheme because he felt the politics of climate change in 2006-07 was moving against him. We had a terrible drought, you may remember, and he was responding politically. That's not a criticism, that's a statement of fact. And so I wouldn't say he had a high level of commitment personally, but he certainly did take it to the election. And the irony is, if he'd won the election, I suspect we would have had an emissions trading scheme in place for many years. What changed things? Well, really what changed things was the shift of opinion in America, where the right, the Republican right, moved from being rational about the environment, as the George Bush Sr. had been, to turning this issue into a values or identity issue. And that ecosystem, that right-wing ecosystem, feeds on itself and supports itself. So, right-wing media supporting right-wing politicians, it's like an echo chamber.
Is there money involved? Is there money? I mean, was part of this the genesis of? Of course, at the same time, we'd had in Inconvenient Truth, the Al Gore movie that was around 2006. Was there a rise of sort of fossil fuel industry, big money from those companies, tipping money in to start lobbying in a big way at that point to help fuel this? Was that part of the equation?
Yeah, it definitely. And Michael Mann's latest book, The New Climate Wars, chronicles that in a very detailed way. yes, there's the money and vested interest from the fossil fuel lobby is a big part of it, but it's part of the explanation. It's not the entirety of it. I mean, what developed was essentially the fascination of the right, the political right, instead of being focused on economics and arguing for smaller government, lower taxes, more competition, all that kind of stuff. The political right became more focused on cultural issues, and they weaponised, for example, gay marriage was like a absolutely diabolical sort of kryptonite-laden third rail in centre-right politics until we actually managed to legalise it, and then of course that subsided. And global warming and climate change and responses there too have been the same. Whereas the need for a rational response is self-evident, but it's not. But look, this denial of science is absolutely a thing.
I believe it was Josh Frydenberg particularly, and Scott Morrison to a degree, developed the NEG, the National Energy Guarantee, which should have moved us forward again. And then instead he was rolled by, it turns out, Scott Morrison. I asked him what he thought, where we could go from there. And we'll just go back to that interview.
The problem we had with the NEG was a minority, but a substantial minority, in the coalition party room who were prepared to cross the floor and, potentially bring down the government over the NEG legislation. And there was a view held by many of them, particularly Abbott, particularly Murdoch, that it was better to have a shortened Labor government if that was the price of getting rid of me. I mean, this is what Rupert Murdoch said to Kerry Stokes. I mean, if you read my book, Murdoch acknowledged it as much in his direct conversation with me, and this was certainly their agenda. So you're dealing with it's really weird stuff, right? So, but there is a view, a channel of thought on the right, the populist right, I guess you could call it, that believes that, in Tony Abbott's immortal words, that climate change is crap. And that's what you grapple with. And the problem that the coalition has is that that group operate like terrorists. Now, I hasten to add they're not using bombs and knives and so forth, but their technique is the technique of the terrorist in the sense that they say, unless you give me what we want, we will blow the joint up. And you see this bullying all the time. I mean, there's a sort of right at the heart of the coalition is this thuggery. And it is enabled, enlivened, amplified by their friends in the media. So ultimately managing that, navigating that was enormously difficult. And, to be honest with you, and this shows I was clearly mistaken, I thought their motives in August of 2018 were largely to get rid of me, to be honest. And I thought that after Morrison had been re-elected, I thought the NEG would reappear.
Really? Oh.
Yeah, I did, because he supported it, Josh Frydenberg supported it, and I thought, well, the industry wants it, it was clearly the right thing to do. And, I never abandoned it. I mean, the only decision the Cabinet made in that beginning of that crazy week in August was to not put the bill into the House that week, because it was obvious there was a huge collision building up, so it was a timing issue. We never abandoned it as policy, but Morrison did abandon it. And so as a result, we do not have any federal policy that integrates climate and energy, and so inevitably leadership on climate and energy policy is being taken up by the states.